Here is an illustration of our solar system. We have the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and several dwarf planets, the most famous of which is Pluto. Here are the 8 major planets and the Sun to scale. There are 2 widely held models of the origin of the solar system. One is the evolutionary view that the solar system formed from a cloud of dust and gas by itself 4.5 billion years ago. The other is that the solar system was created by God about 6,000 years ago. The question before us is which model does a better job of explaining the origin of the solar system. Both models make different predictions about what we should find. So let us look at the facts and see which model fits the data the best. Here is an artist's impression of the early solar system, where collisions between particles in an accretion disk are thought to have led to the formation of planetesimals and eventually planets, as depicted by the Nebula Hypothesis. Note that this is based entirely on the presupposition of the Nebula Hypothesis and what the idea suggests, and not necessarily reality. The Sun is thought to have formed by the center of a gas cloud collapsing. Planets, dwarf planets, moons, and other bodies are thought to have formed as dust and gas orbiting around the forming star, collecting into larger and larger clumps. However, the picture generally depicted of planets building up this way does not fit observation or what science says will happen in such clouds. Here are some so-called proto-planetary disks in the Orion Nebula. The problem is that 5 of these disks are seen edge-on, and there is no real clue as to what is going on inside. The other 10 simply look like stars plowing through the Orion Nebula, with their magnetic fields producing shock waves and contrails. There is really nothing in these images suggesting actual protoplanetary disks, let alone planet formation itself. These images show rings of dust and gas around several stars, but no actual evidence of planet formation. In fact, the ring effect could very well be a result of planets being present in those gaps and either sweeping up or diverting the dust that would otherwise have been there. Even when you improve the resolution, all you get are better defined rings. The problem is that even if it were happening, there is no way these images would indicate for certain the difference between forming planets, simple rings in the disks, or a situation where existing planets are sweeping up dust and gas that got into the star system by some event from the star or some other source. Even when you reach the highest possible resolution that we have with the nearest example that we have images of, there's still no actual evidence of planetary formation. In fact, what we see in this image would be consistent with 2 other possibilities. The first is that there could be existing planets in this dust cloud that have created the rings by plowing through them. The other possibility would be that the material forming, it simply has formed rings as a result of orbital mechanics, similar to the rings of Saturn. One thing is certain. There is no objective evidence of planetary formation. Can you interpret it that way? Sure, you can, but it is not objective evidence for such. It is simply a subjective interpretation of the data. All planets and moons should orbit in the same direction as the Sun rotates. All planets and moons should rotate in same west-east direction as the Sun rotates. Dwarf planets and their moons should fit the same pattern since the category was not invented until the 1990s and the first 2 dwarf planets discovered, Pluto and Ceres, were originally called planets. Rocky planets should be found near the Sun. Gas giants should be found farther out. No prediction of small icy planets, dwarf planets, still farther out. In fact, it should be impossible for these bodies to form that far from the Sun under the Nebula Hypothesis. Because of this, dwarf planets can be considered a failed prediction of the Nebula Hypothesis. To save the theory from this problem, they have suggested several methods of planetary migration that allow for an object to start from any place in the solar system and end up any other place in the solar system. God created the solar system on day 4 of the creation week of Genesis 1. This event should have happened about 6,000 years ago. The flood on Earth Genesis 6 to 8 may have had components that produced effects in the space within the solar system. The solar system should show some degree of order and patterns. There should be evidence on planets, including dwarf planets, consistent with the solar system being thousands of years old and not billions. One set of evidence for planetary bodies being young is geological activity, even in bodies that should have frozen solid after just millions of years. This geologic activity would include dwarf planets and moons. You might even find some activity in asteroids. Proponents of naturalistic models should be constantly surprised as to what they find in the solar system. We should expect to find evidence that goes against naturalistic models of the solar system's origin. Let's look at the dynamics of a cloud in space. One problem with a solar system mass cloud spread throughout the volume of the solar system is that gravity would be too weak to cause collapse. A particle deep inside the cloud would bounce around hitting other particles. A particle near the edge of the cloud would bounce around hitting other particles until it is bounced to the edge and escapes from the cloud. The gravity in any such cloud is simply too weak to cause the cloud to collapse. To cause a collapse, you need a central dense spot to increase the gravitational pull within the cloud, or the cloud has to be dense enough for its gravity to overcome the pressure of the gas within the cloud. The problem is that, by itself, a cloud of dust and gas in space will not produce the conditions needed for collapse. Without either a central mass or sufficient density to overcome gas pressure, the Nebula Hypothesis is a non-starter. Two proposed ways to get the needed compression of gas clouds are forces from a supernova or galactic collisions. Since a supernova is an exploding star, and galaxies are large groups of stars, you still cannot get the first stars. Another problem is that while dust can clump together to form larger clumps and possibly even small pebbles, they can't grow any bigger than that. Once the clumps reach pebble size, the impact of these pebbles are fast enough to break the pebbles up. You need to get to a kilometer or more size asteroid before there is enough gravity to grow any bigger. Thus, there is no way to go from small pebbles to kilometer-size asteroids, and so no way to get planets. Even if you somehow got to kilometer-sized asteroids, they would not last long enough to form planets. These kilometer-plus size asteroids would experience drag from the surrounding gas, causing them to slow down and spiral into the sun. Thus, there is no way to get planets from this process, since the same environment that formed the asteroids would quickly destroy them. One of the big problems for this model is that the sun rotates too slowly. The sun contains 99.9% of the mass of the solar system, but the planets contain 98% of the angular momentum. This means planets have 50 times the sun's angular momentum, while the sun would have needed to have 700 times the planet's combined angular momentum. The proposed solution is that the sun has slowed over time, but this fails to consider the true scope of the problem. To get the sun, even with the planets, it would have to be rotating 50 times faster than it is, but to satisfy the conservation of angular momentum, it would have started rotating 700 times faster than that. That means that the sun's initial rotation rate had to be 35,000 times its present rate. The sun is presently rotating at 1 revolution per 25.38 Earth days. So rotation rate 35,000 times faster produces an initial period of revolution of 1 minute and 2.65 seconds. According to the CRC Handbook of Chemistry and Physics, the sun's equatorial rotational velocity is 2.0578 kilometers per second. This means that the initial equatorial rotational velocity would be 72,023 kilometers per second, or nearly a quarter the speed of light. The sun's surface escape velocity is 617.23 kilometers per second, which is 116.7 times smaller than the initial equatorial rotational velocity of 72,023 kilometers per second. The result is that the sun would literally fly apart, assuming it formed to begin with, which of course it would not have. The International Astronomical Union defined a planet as an object that orbits the sun, has sufficient mass to be round or nearly round, is not a satellite, moon of another object, has removed debris and small objects from the area around its orbit. The fourth qualification assumes the Nebular Hypothesis. A more objective way to put it is, removes debris and small objects from the area around its orbit. Gravitationally dominant in its area, so that there are no other bodies of comparable size other than its satellites. There are 8 bodies in the solar system that meet these criteria: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. Sorry, Pluto fans, Pluto has other similar-sized objects around it, so it lacks gravitational dominance. Mercury is the closest planet to the Sun at an average distance of 35,928,880 miles. Its year is 88 Earth days. Its rotation period is 58.65 Earth days, west to east. Its days are 175 Earth days, 22 hours, 36 minutes, and 29 seconds. Its equatorial radius is 1,516 miles. Its orbital inclination is 7 degrees, which is greater than any other planet. Its orbital eccentricity is 0.206, which is greater than any other planet. Its mean density is 5.43 grams per cubic centimeter. Water is 1 gram per cubic centimeter. This is so dense that it is thought to have a large iron core comprising over 40% of its volume. Mercury is way denser than evolutionary models say it should be. The explanation given is that a large impact stripped away the lighter material into space. However, there is no evidence for this. It is simply needed to make the evolutionary models fit reality. Mercury also has a magnetic field, although any original magnetic field should have disappeared long ago if Mercury were billions of years old. The only way for a planet to maintain a magnetic field for billions of years is a planetary dynamo inside a molten core. Mercury is too small to maintain a molten core for billions of years. The explanation given is that Mercury's core had been kept liquid by sulfur mixed with the iron. However, evolutionary models don't allow sulfur to condense so close to the Sun, making yet another problem for these models. Even worse for evolutionary models, the Messenger space probe showed that Mercury's magnetic field strength has fallen since the Mariner 10 in 1974. Not only is this decay too fast for Mercury to have maintained a magnetic field for billions of years, it fits the predictions of a young Earth creation model of planetary magnetic fields. So, Mercury is too dense to have formed from a planetary nebula. It has a magnetic field it cannot have if it is billions of years old. Venus is the second planet from the Sun, with an average distance from the Sun of 67,234,935 miles. It has a year of 224 Earth days, 16 hours, 48 minutes. Its rotational period is 243 Earth days from east to west. Its days are 117 Earth days. It has an equatorial radius of 3,760 miles. It has an orbital inclination of 3.39 degrees. It has an orbital eccentricity of just 0.007, which is quite circular. Venus has a thick, largely carbon dioxide atmosphere, which causes a runaway greenhouse effect, making it the hottest planet in the solar system, with a temperature of almost 900 degrees. Its surface pressure is about 90 atmospheres, the same as being 3,000 feet deep in Earth's oceans. Venus is about the same size as Earth, with about the same chemical makeup. Since they are in about the same place in the solar system according to evolutionary models, they should be a lot alike, yet they could not be more different. When it rains on Venus, it rains sulfuric acid. It has no tectonic plates and no magnetic field. If both planets formed at the same time, from the same material in the same place, why are they so different? The Earth has a moon, but Venus has none. The evolutionist theory to explain this is that Venus once had a moon, but it was destroyed by a giant impact. No evidence exists for such a moon or its destruction. Venus's surface seems quite young, because its surface is so fresh. There is no indication of large amounts of erosion or chemical weathering despite a highly acidic atmosphere. Evolutionists speculate that the entire planet was resurfaced by some unknown means for some unknown reason. They date this event to 500 million years ago based on crater count. This date requires assuming that current crater rates have been unchanged for 500 million years. There is evidence elsewhere in the solar system that this assumption is wrong. According to evolutionary models, Venus and Earth should be quite similar, but they are very different. Venus's surface is young and fresh. It rotates east to west, which goes against it forming from a planetary nebula. Venus is consistent with a solar system that is just a few thousand years old and not consistent with a solar system that is billions of years old. The Earth is the third planet from the Sun, with an average distance of 92,955,807 miles. Its year is 365.25 Earth days. Its rotational period is 23 hours, 55 minutes, and 41 seconds, west to east. This results in a day lasting 24 hours. Earth's equatorial radius is 3,959 miles. Its orbital inclination is 0 degrees. Its orbital eccentricity is a low 0.017, making it nearly circular. The Earth is unique in one important way, and that is that it is our home. According to evolutionists, the Earth is supposed to be 4.5 billion years old, but there is abundant evidence that the Earth is much younger. The 4.5 billion year evolutionary age of the Earth is based on a PB206/PB204 isochron with meteors. It was published in the paper Age of Meteorites and the Earth by Claire Patterson in 1956. The date assumes that the Earth formed from a planetary nebula. He also indicates that if the Earth had formed differently, it could be any age younger than 4.5 billion years. That would include 6,000 years. For now, we will grant evolutionists the age of the Earth since it causes other problems for their models of how the solar system formed. We are only going to look at these problems here and not the age of the Earth. The Earth has a powerful magnetic field that protects us from solar radiation. Old Earth theory proposes a dynamo in the Earth's liquid core. This theory remains highly speculative and has problems, one of which is getting it started in the first place. The Earth's magnetic field is decaying. It loses about half its energy every 1,400 years. The usual response is that the Earth's magnetic field is simply reversing, which it has done in the past. However, this is not about dipole field strength on the Earth, but total field energy, and that energy is fading quite quickly. Projecting back, the total field energy would double every 1,400 years, getting impossibly strong 20,000 years ago. None of this is explained by a planetary dynamo, which would need to maintain that energy for billions of years. The Earth is just right for life. The magnetic field protects us from solar radiation. The atmosphere is just right for life. A thicker or different composition would create a runaway greenhouse effect. Thinner, and we in the Earth would freeze. The rotation rate is just right. A faster rotation would produce violent winds. A slower rotation would produce extreme temperature changes. 70% of the Earth's surface is water. If the Earth's surface were smoothed out, this water would flood the Earth to a depth of 1.5 miles. So the Earth has more than enough water for a global flood. The presence of this water on the Earth goes against a planetary nebula. Water can't condense this close to the Sun, so the Earth would have had to form without water. So, where did it come from? Evolutionists used to claim that the Earth's water came from comets. But comet ice is chemically different from Earth's oceans, including the fact that comet ice has a higher level of deuterium. The result is that Earth's oceans could not have come from comets, and the Earth should be dry. All this means that the Earth defies being formed from a planetary nebula. Mars is the fourth planet from the Sun, with an average distance from the Sun of 141,971,404 miles. It has a year of 687 Earth days. It has a rotational period of 24 hours, 37 minutes, 26 seconds from west to east. It has a day of 24 hours, 39 minutes, and 35 seconds. It has an equatorial radius of 2,106 miles. It has an orbital inclination of 1.86 degrees. It has an orbital eccentricity 0.093. Mars, while it is smaller than Earth, but it has both the largest volcanoes and the largest canyon in the solar system. It has many features that are carved by water, but today Mars is dry. It has frozen water, but it has an atmosphere that is too thin for liquid water today. Evolutionists are desperate to find life on a planet other than Earth, as if that would prove life can come from non-life. However, 2 times impossible is still impossible. Besides, even if life were found on Mars, it could have easily arrived there from Earth by several means. To make life possible on Mars in the past, evolutionists need a lot of water on Mars for a long time. They need a long history of water on Mars for life to have evolved there. They speculate that Mars once had a thicker atmosphere that allowed liquid water and that the solar wind stripped it away. Now, in this case, there is evidence for a large impact in the form of the Hellas Impact Basin. At 2,100 kilometers, that is 1,300 miles in diameter and 9 kilometers, that is 5.6 miles deep, is the largest impact crater on Mars. The energy of impact was about 5.3 times 10 to the 26 power joules. A blast of 1.27 times 10 to the 11th power megatons, equivalent to 8.48 times 10 to the 12th power atomic bombs like the one dropped on Hiroshima. The bad news for evolutionists is that Hellas is on the opposite side of Mars from the Tharsis volcanoes. Directly opposite the center of Hellas is the western side of Alba Patera's caldera. Alba Patera is the largest Martian volcano by surface area. This shows a cause and effect relationship between Hellas and the Tharsis volcanoes. But based on cratering, evolutionists date them as millions of years apart. This shows that dating surfaces by craters is not accurate. The evidence for a cause and effect relationship between Hellas and the Tharsis volcanoes is too strong. The odds of this alignment happening by chance is too small for there to be no connection and millions of years of time in between. Furthermore, the evidence shows that the water that once flowed on Mars was concentrated sulfuric acid. This would be consistent with heavy volcanic activity. It would have been deadly to life. Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system and 5th planet from the Sun, with an average distance of 483,630,473 miles. It is the first of the gas giants with a year of 11.862 Earth years. It has a rotational period of 9 hours, 50 minutes, and 26 seconds from west to east for a day of 9 hours, 55 minutes, and 30 seconds. Its equatorial radius is 43,441 miles. Its orbital inclination is 1.31 degrees. Its orbital eccentricity is 0.048. It is covered with large bands of clouds with large electrical storms. Its most famous feature is the Great Red Spot, a huge storm larger than the Earth that has been raging for as long as we have had telescopes to look at it with, making it at least several hundred years old. It can be seen with private telescopes of at least 8 inches. Spinning in just under 10 hours, Jupiter is not only the fastest rotating planet, but it is faster than evolutionary models say it should be. If it condensed out of a swirling cloud of gas and dust, it should be spinning about once a week. The energy needed to spin it up is fast, as it is just too great. Evolutionary models also predicted that Jupiter would lack certain elements, including argon, krypton, xenon, and nitrogen. Our probes have shown that it has plenty of these elements. Evolutionary models require Jupiter to have a large core that is at least 10 times the mass of the Earth. Such a core would have been needed to form Jupiter from a nebula to provide a gravitational center for the gas and dust. The Galileo probe found that the core was at most 3 times the mass of the Earth, and probably smaller if it even exists. The probe Juno made repeated close approaches to Jupiter and now shows its interior to be not so cleanly divided. It has shown Jupiter's core is not solid, being mingled with the overlaying slushy hydrogen, resulting in no clear division. The results show just how wrong predictions from the nebula model turn out to be. The poles of Jupiter were not what was expected. They are quite dynamic, with many large cyclones moving around each other. This has been demonstrated to be the case at both the North and South poles. Estimates show that Jupiter would have taken 10 to 100 million years to form from a nebula. Evolutionary models show the dust and gas needed would have only lasted 5 million years. So, according to evolutionary models, Jupiter would not have had time to form, so it should not even exist. Saturn is the sixth planet from the Sun, with an average distance of 886,686,852 miles. Its year is 29.458 Earth years. Its rotational period is 10 hours, 13 minutes, and 26 seconds west to east, making for a day of 10 hours and 30 minutes. It has an equatorial radius of 37,449 miles, an orbital inclination of 2.49 degrees, and an orbital eccentricity of 0.056. Saturn's rings are the most recognized planetary feature of astronomy. They make Saturn the most easily recognized planet in the solar system. Despite their solid appearance, they're composed of small particles of ice and dust orbiting together, ranging from dust to boulders. They are also extremely thin when compared to their diameter. They literally disappear when seen on edge. Saturn's rings have some strange features. They include spokes across the rings discovered by Voyager in 1980. Cassini has shown that they were still there in 2014. Some rings are even braided. No one expected to see these types of features in the rings. Some of them are still puzzling. No one really knows how the rings were formed. There is some speculation of an asteroid shattering a moon or being torn to pieces by Saturn's gravity, but there is no evidence for this. According to NASA, their age and origin are unknown. Saturn defies evolutionary models in other ways. It has a magnetic field that is too symmetrical around its axis for the dynamo model. It does, however, fit a young Earth model of planetary magnetic fields in strength and structure. Calculations show that the interactions between the cores and gaseous nebula would cause Saturn and Jupiter's cores to spiral into the Sun before the planets could fully form. So according to the nebula model, Saturn and Jupiter should not exist since they should have fallen into the Sun billions of years ago. This is called the migration problem, and there is as yet no solution. Since Saturn and Jupiter clearly exist, their very existence falsifies the nebula model. Uranus is the seventh planet from the Sun with an average distance of 1,783,952,074 miles. Its year is 84 Earth years. Its rotational period is 17 hours, 54 minutes, 14 seconds, east to west. The inclination of its equator to its orbit is 97.9 degrees. Its equatorial radius is 15,517 miles. Its orbital inclination is 0.77 degrees. Its orbital eccentricity is 0.046. Voyager 2 is the only probe to have visited Uranus. It possesses several problems for the Nebula Hypothesis. The first is that it spins east to west, and unlike Venus, this is not a slow rotation, but a fairly fast one, just short of 18 hours, despite the Nebula Hypothesis requiring west to east. Shown here in false color is Uranus' south pole. Uranus literally orbits the Sun on its side with a rotational tilt of 97.9 degrees. This is way more than the Nebula Hypothesis can produce. So, it is alleged to have been tilted over by a collision with an Earth-sized asteroid for which there is no evidence. There are other problems with this hypothetical collision, including Uranus' stability as it rolls through space. Its orbit is nearly circular, and its orbital inclination is less than any planet other than Earth. Uranus also has more than 24 moons and a faint ring, all of which orbit at the equator. It has also been proposed that Uranus simply wobbled into this tilt, dragging its moons with it by tidal drag, but this degree of tilt is beyond any reasonable wobbling, particularly given Uranus' reverse spin. The other gas giants radiate more heat into space than they get from the Sun, but Uranus doesn't. Uranus has a strong magnetic field, despite the fact that the Nebula Hypothesis predicted that it would have little or no magnetic field. The young Earth creation model developed by Dr. Humphreys predicted Uranus would have a magnetic field and at the right strength. Also, Uranus's magnetic field is tilted about 60 degrees with respect to the rotational axis, so that the magnetic poles are near the equator. The source of Uranus's field is offset from the center by about 1/3 of a planetary radius. According to the dynamo theory, the magnetic poles and rotational axes should nearly always be closely aligned, except for a relatively short time during a field reversal. But Uranus's field does not seem to be reversing because it is not alone in this trait. Neptune is the 8th planet from the Sun with an average distance of 2,794,353,810 miles. Its year is 164.79 Earth years. Its rotation period is 17 hours, 13 minutes, 55 seconds from west to east. Its equatorial radius is 15,299 miles. Its orbital inclination is 1.77 degrees. Its orbital eccentricity is 0.01. Neptune is warmer than the Nebula Hypothesis says it should be. It radiates twice as much heat as it gets from the Sun. It is more active than the Nebula Hypothesis says it should be, with the fastest wind speeds in the solar system. A dark spot about the size of the Earth was discovered by Voyager 2 in 1989. This one disappeared before 1994, and a new one was discovered in 1995 in a different location. Neptune is clearly an active, changing place. It is neither cold nor dead, as evolutionists expected. Neptune's magnetic field is also a problem for evolutionists. Like Uranus, Neptune's magnetic field is tilted about 60 degrees with respect to the rotational axis, with the magnetic poles near the equator. The source of Neptune's field is offset from the center by about 1/3 of a planetary radius. According to the dynamo theory, the magnetic and rotation axes should nearly always be closely aligned. This falsifies the idea that Uranus's field was in the process of reversing because the odds of two planets reversing their magnetic field at the same time is way too small. The young Earth creation model of planetary magnetic fields developed by Dr. Humphreys also predicted Neptune would have a magnetic field and at the right strength. Neptune has an even bigger problem for evolutionary models because, according to the Nebula model, it should not even exist. Both Uranus and Neptune are so far from the Sun that the orbital speeds are so slow that the models show it would take longer than the evolutionary age of the solar system for them to form to their current size. So, according to evolutionary models, Uranus and Neptune should not exist, but they do. This problem has been known for some time, having been discovered in 1972. Even though, according to evolutionary models, Uranus and Neptune should not exist, evolutionists keep talking as though the Nebula Hypothesis is a proven fact. Uranus and Neptune are not a problem for creationists, but evolutionists are stuck with a theory that does not work because God is excluded as a starting assumption. The International Astronomical Union defined a dwarf planet as an object that orbits the Sun. It has sufficient mass to be round or nearly round. It is not a satellite or a moon of another object. It does not remove debris and small objects from the area around its orbit. The fourth qualification assumes the Nebular Hypothesis. A more objective way to put it is, does not remove debris and small objects from the area around its orbit. It is not gravitationally dominant in its area, so there are other bodies of comparable size other than its satellites. When some of these small bodies started to be discovered in the outer regions of the solar system, astronomers did not see a need to debate whether or not Pluto should be classified as a planet. This also did not necessarily require the need of inventing a new classification because the new bodies could simply be classified as asteroids, just like Ceres was. However, the discovery of Eris presented a problem because it was bigger than Pluto. Not much bigger, mind you, but the decision had to be made as to whether to classify Eris as a new major planet or what else to do. Consequently, the International Astronomical Union invented the new category of dwarf planet. This resulted in a downgrading of Pluto, but an upgrade for Ceres. The wisdom of this decision, despite the fact that there remains public controversy, is evident in the fact that quite a few similarly sized objects have been discovered. The only remaining disagreement seems to be among those of us who were taught Pluto was a planet in school. There are just those who do not want to give it up. Either that or the fourth memorization of the list, including Pluto, is too stuck in their memories. Ceres is the closest dwarf planet to the Sun at an average distance of 257,112,044 miles. Its year is 4.6 Earth years. Rotation period 9 hours, 4 minutes, 19 seconds west to east. Its days are 9 hours, 4 minutes, 37 seconds long. Its equatorial radius is 304 miles. Its orbital inclination is 10.6 degrees. Its orbital eccentricity is 0.07976. Like Pluto, Ceres has had a classification problem. When it was first discovered, it was classified as a planet. After the discovery of smaller bodies in the same area, it was downgraded to an asteroid. It was recently upgraded to the new classification of a dwarf planet. This is Ahana Mons, a 3-mile-high ice volcano and the highest mountain on Ceres. It is erupting a salty, icy slush, producing a mountain with steep slopes. This was a surprise on a dwarf planet that should have completely solidified. Ceres also defies the Nebula Hypothesis by its crater count. Evolutionists predicted 10 to 15 craters more than 250 miles across, and at least 40 craters more than 62 miles across. They found only 16 craters more than 62 miles across, and no craters greater than 175 miles wide. Ceres shows evidence of being young. This is inconsistent with a solar system that formed from a nebula billions of years ago. It is, however, consistent with a solar system that was created just a few thousand years ago. Pluto was the first of the outer dwarf planets to be discovered and the closest of them to the Sun at an average distance of 3,674,487,277 miles. Its year is 248.5 Earth years. Its rotation period is 6.4 Earth days. East to west. It was originally classified as a planet, but downgraded to a dwarf planet after the discovery of Eris, which is in the same area and a little larger. So if you're older than 25, you have been taught that Pluto was a planet and probably still think of it as one. Its equatorial radius is 737.6 miles. Its orbital inclination is 17.15 degrees. Its orbital eccentricity is 0.248. One of the problems Pluto poses for the Nebula Hypothesis is the fact that it rotates backwards, as do Venus and Uranus. Having one such body is bad enough, but 3 should falsify this model. Pluto has been shown to be emitting X-rays that would result from interactions between the solar wind and a planetary magnetic field. Pluto also deflects the solar wind in a manner that suggests it has a magnetosphere. Unfortunately, the chance to see directly if Pluto does have a planetary magnetic field was lost. Naturalistic models predicted that Pluto would not have a magnetic field. So, because of weight considerations, New Horizons does not have a magnetometer on board. The dynamic creation planetary magnetic field model not only has no problem with this, but actually predicted it. The most noticeable feature of Pluto is a large impact crater that exposed a lighter material under a darker surface material. The lighter material is probably ice that melted during the impact and refroze as it filled the crater. What is a particularly interesting aspect of this feature is the fact that it bears a striking resemblance to a dog, with the lower part going into the body while forming a snout on the right-hand side. Given the fact that this feature exists on a planet with the same name as a famous cartoon dog is rather intriguing. It's almost as if God knew and that he has a sense of humor. The other thing to note is that despite this large crater, Pluto's surface seems to have relatively few craters. This means that its surface is younger than most of the cratering in the solar system, suggesting recent geologic activity. Geologic activity on such a small cold world is more consistent with a young Pluto that is thousands of years old rather than billions. Here we have evidence of several cryovolcanoes and other mountainous features. Once again, particularly with the lack of craters, the evidence suggests a very young surface. A close-up look at Sputnik Planum shows evidence of current nitrogen ice flows. These ice flows go right up against the higher original terrain. But along with the polygonal cells, it suggested this is a very recent feature. Even looking at the older terrain, why you can see a couple of craters, most of it is rugged mountainous terrain. Furthermore, the various grooves that make up the mountainous features of the old terrain suggest the possibility of channels that would have been the flow channels of some of the material that filled the crater. This is further evidence of a young terrain. The simple fact of the matter is these types of features can be found all over the area. You have thin ice sheets with evidence of the flow of nitrogen ice polygons in the ice and cryovolcanoes. This also includes smaller filled-in craters. It also includes further evidence of grooved high ground areas. What we have here is evidence that Pluto is not a cold, dead world as would be expected if it were billions of years old. But rather, what we see on Pluto is evidence of the geological activity we would expect on a relatively young world that has not had the time to freeze solid. Moons are planetary bodies that orbit larger planetary bodies. Many of the moons in the solar system cause problems for naturalistic models. This is no surprise from a creationist perspective, since these models assume the solar system formed by purely natural causes. According to creationists, moons and planets did not form as evolutionists assume they did. Earth's only permanent natural satellite with an average distance from the Earth of 239,000 miles. Orbital period 27 days, 7 hours, 43 minutes, and 11.6 seconds. Its rotation period is 27 days, 7 hours, 40 minutes, 48 seconds, west to east. The Moon is the only other planetary body mankind has visited in person. Its equatorial radius is 1,079 miles. Its orbital inclination is 30.35 degrees. Its orbital eccentricity is 0.549. The Moon presents many problems for naturalistic models. The main one is its existence. There are several failed theories of its formation proven wrong by the Apollo missions to the Moon. The Moon has numerous ghost craters, which are craters filled in by lava. The lava flows resulted from lava coming to the surface after a large impact. The problem for naturalistic models of cratering is that the large impact would obliterate any existing craters. This means that the ghost crater impacts had to occur after the large impact, but before the lava flowed. This could not have taken millions of years. At most, it would have been hours or days. This shows the cratering to be far more rapid than naturalistic models predict, thus showing that these surfaces are thousands of years old at most. The Moon is slowly moving farther away and slowing the Earth's rotation in the process. This was first discovered following the Apollo moon landings by bouncing lasers off reflectors left behind by astronauts. The reflectors were designed to accurately measure the Earth-Moon distance. The measurements showed that the Moon is getting further away at a rate of 1.5 inches or 3.82 centimeters per year. Furthermore, a day is getting longer by 1.7 milliseconds per century. Both effects are a result of tidal forces between the Earth and the Moon. These are the same forces that are responsible for the high and low tides experienced twice a day. Plugging the current data into the laws of physics. The result is that the Moon would have been at the Earth's Roche limit of 15,562 kilometers 1.171 billion years ago. This is far short of the 4.5 billion years given for the age of the Earth and Moon, suggesting that the Earth-Moon system cannot be 4.5 billion years old. The giant collision hypothesis of the origin of the Moon proposes that the Moon formed as a result of a collision between the Earth and a Mars-sized body, referred to as Theia. This is the latest in a long line of theories, and it will probably be taught in schools as fact, only to be replaced in a few decades by a new theory that will be taught as fact. One of the problems with it is that the impact needs to be at just the right angle to work. There's a greater chance of destroying both planets completely than producing the Moon. The question before us is, can you get the current Earth-Moon system from this process in a manner consistent with the observed data? What follows is an analysis of the receding of the Moon and the slowing of the Earth's rotation to test the feasibility of this model with regard to the laws of celestial mechanics. This model has a set of starting conditions for the Earth-Moon system resulting from the hypothetical impact. The model has a 5-hour day on Earth when the Moon formed. It further starts with the Moon just 14,000 miles or 22,526 kilometers from Earth. These starting conditions allow us to calculate this model forward to the present to see how it fits reality. The result was a present lunar distance of 440,476 kilometers, which is larger than the current value. The result was a present Earth day of 44.9 hours, nearly twice the current value. There have occasionally been observed flashes on the Moon called transient lunar phenomenon. They suggest that some form of outgassing occasionally occurs on the Moon. 579 such observations have been cataloged by NASA. Apollo 15 even detected radon gas coming from Aristarchus crater. Apparently, the Moon is still geologically active. This makes perfect sense if the Moon is only a few thousand years old, but not if it is billions of years old. Jupiter has over 60 moons, and they also pose problems for naturalistic models of the solar system. We will look at the 4 largest ones. Io has a radius of 1,131.7 miles, making it larger than Earth's Moon. It orbits Jupiter at 262,088 miles with an orbital period of 42 hours. Io is the most volcanic place in the solar system. Over 400 volcanoes have been found, at least 150 of which are active. One called Loki is more powerful than all of Earth's volcanoes combined. These volcanoes are so powerful that they have been observed ejecting material as high as 250 miles into space. Lava geysers have been measured shooting material out at over 2,000 miles an hour, 10 times faster than the fastest seen on Earth. Io puts out twice as much heat as the Earth. Some of it comes from tidal flexing between Jupiter and the other 3 large moons. However, tidal flexing can only produce some of this heat. If Io really were billions of years old, this heat would have dissipated long ago. It is, however, not a problem if Io is only thousands of years old. According to naturalistic models, Io should not have all these volcanoes, but it does. Another problem is the amount of lava being spewed from Io. One volcano alone floods the surface with 100 cubic meters of lava per second. The amount of material being erupted on Io is so large that if Io were really billions of years old, it would have recycled itself 30 times. Europa has a radius of 950 miles, making it smaller than Earth's Moon. It orbits Jupiter at 414,000 miles with an orbital period of 85 hours. Europa is the smoothest object in the solar system. One of its most noticeable features is its lack of craters. Because it is covered with a shell of ice, it is almost completely smooth. This ice is several miles thick and is thought to have an ocean of liquid water underneath. In the evolutionary mindset, where there is water, there is life. Evolutionists are so desperate to find life off Earth that just finding evidence of liquid water starts the claims of possible life, even without evidence for life. The idea is that finding life elsewhere would prove that life got started all on its own. If life is found on Europa, it could have come from Earth. If God created life on Earth, he could have put some microbes on Europa. Because Europa has so few craters, they could be studied easily, and the results go against naturalistic models of cratering. This study showed that one impact can throw up debris, forming even more craters of all sizes. This effect was already known, but the study showed that 95% of small craters and many medium-sized ones were formed in this way. This shows that planets and moons were hit by fewer impacts than previously thought. This calls into question the dating of surfaces by the number of impacts. Ganymede is Jupiter's largest moon, with a radius of 1,635 miles, making it larger than Earth's moon and Mercury. Ganymede is also the largest moon in the solar system. It orbits Jupiter at 665,000 miles with an orbital period of 172 hours. Naturalistic models predicted that Ganymede would not have a magnetic field. It is too small and cold for a planetary dynamo. However, Ganymede does have a magnetic field. Evolutionists are forced by the strength of the magnetic field to assume that Ganymede has a dynamo. But Ganymede could not have maintained a liquid core for such a dynamo to last billions of years. Creationist models and timescales, on the other hand, do allow for the presence of a decaying magnetic field even in a solid core. Ganymede is a problem for naturalistic models, but it fits well with creation models. Ganymede's terrain is very unusual. There are rocky areas, grooved areas, and relatively smooth areas. Some of this flat terrain goes right across grooved and rocky terrain with paintbrush-like streaks. Some of these areas have few, if any, craters. Some of the grooved areas have smooth, crater-free material in the grooves. All this suggests Ganymede is still geologically active and thus much younger than evolutionary models claim. Callisto is Jupiter's second largest moon, with a radius of 1,498 miles, making it larger than Earth's moon but smaller than Mercury. It orbits Jupiter at 1,169,856 miles with an orbital period of 400 hours, and it is the farthest out of the Galilean moons. Callisto is the most heavily cratered object in the solar system. As a result, evolutionists see its surface as very old, about 4 billion years. But does it fit the naturalistic cratering model? Evolutionists expected a large number of smaller craters to go along with the larger ones. But they're not there, so Callisto does not fit the naturalistic cratering model. Some pictures show evidence of fresh ice on the surface of Callisto. There is still erosion and geological activity on Callisto. This should not be the case if Callisto really were 4.5 billion years old. It should be cold and dead, but it isn't. Saturn has dozens of moons of various sizes. Several of them are quite interesting. Let's look at some of them. Enceladus has a radius of 157 miles. It orbits at 147,918 miles with a period of 33 hours. The big surprise of Enceladus is the huge geyser at its south pole. This is a problem for naturalistic models, since if it were billions of years old, it would have cooled and frozen solid long ago. Yet it is spewing water into space and actually painting its neighbors with ice and snow. One theory is a combination of tidal and radiogenic heating. While tidal heating could produce heat for 4.5 billion years, it does not produce enough to explain the huge geyser. Radiogenic heating could produce enough heat, but radiogenic heating decreases with time as the radioactive isotopes decay. Enceladus would have needed a lot of radioactive material to start with to still have enough to keep heating Enceladus today. The geyser material would have to come from an ocean under its icy crust. Even with enough heat melting crustal ice, that ice would still thin over time. How much ice would Enceladus need to start with to keep erupting for 4.5 billion years? Saturn's largest moon, Titan, has a radius of 1,600 miles. It orbits Saturn at 759,220 miles in 16 Earth days. It is the only moon in the solar system with a substantial atmosphere at 1.45 times that of Earth. This atmosphere is mostly nitrogen with a little methane mixed in. This methane is a problem for naturalistic models since the sun would break it all down in about 10 million years, far short of 4.5 billion years. Titan is supposed to have been there. If Titan were really 4.5 billion years old, it would have to have a source of methane to replenish its atmosphere. It would have a lot of ethane on its surface from all the broken down methane. The naturalistic predictions were that Titan's surface would have a global ocean of ethane over 1 kilometer deep. With the lander Huygens, this prediction was shown to be wrong. Titan's surface is dry with rocks of water ice. Huygens did find lakes of methane and ethane, but not the global ocean. There are not enough to fulfill the predictions of naturalistic models. Even if the lakes are pure methane, they only add up to about 10% of what is in the atmosphere and would not last more than 10 million years. Yet another problem for naturalistic models is the lack of impact craters on Titan. According to naturalistic models, Titan should have thousands of craters, even allowing for those that burn up in its thick atmosphere. With 22% of Titan's surface surveyed, only 5 impact craters have been found. The fact is that Titan's surface looks quite young. It stands as an excellent example of the failure of naturalistic models and their alleged history. Saturn's co-orbital moons, Janus and Epimetheus. At first glance, they do not look impressive. They are, after all, small moons. It is, however, not their physical structure that is impressive, but their relationship. Their orbits are separated by only 50 kilometers, and as a result, they switch orbits every 4 years in a delicate dance. They have come to be called the dancing moons of Saturn. It is so balanced that every 4 years the inner one becomes the outer one, and the outer one becomes the inner one. This arrangement is so stable and improbable that it suggests design. Uranus has over 25 moons, all of which orbit its equator despite the fact that the planet is tilted more than 90 degrees. It has 5 moons that are massive enough to be round. Miranda is the smallest of Uranus's 5 round moons with a radius of 292 miles. Miranda is the innermost of Uranus's 5 round moons with an orbit of 80,659 miles and a period of 34 hours. It is also the strangest moon of the solar system. It has a lot of different terrain, looking something like a patchwork quilt. Some of it looks like it has been strip mined, not saying it has been, but that was a first impression description. It is a really hard one for naturalistic models. There are areas of rugged, grooved terrain, next to smooth terrain, and heavily catered terrain. The rugged, grooved terrain looks a lot like it was painted on the moon with a brush. It is quite an unusual little moon. Here is a cliff on Miranda that is 6 miles high. That means that it is about a mile higher than Mount Everest on Earth. Miranda's surface gravitational acceleration is 0.259 feet/s2. If you jumped, it would take you 5 minutes and 50 seconds to reach the bottom. You would still slam into the ground at 62 miles per hour. This would be the equivalent of crashing at highway speeds into a wall. Consequently, despite Miranda's feeble gravity, this cliff is still high enough that jumping off of it would kill you. It has been proposed that Miranda was brought into its current state by not 1, but 5 asteroid collisions. But even other evolutionists agree that such a model would have totally destroyed the moon. So, Miranda does not fit naturalistic models. Retrograde moons go against the Nebula Hypothesis. It predicts that they should all be going in the same direction as their parent planet's rotation. Several moons in the solar system don't obey this rule. There are 4 retrograde moons of Jupiter. The main explanation given for these 4 retrograde moons is that they are captured asteroids. The strongest support for this is the fact that they are fairly distant moons, ranging from 21.3 to 23.9 million kilometers in an elliptical orbits, along with Jupiter's proximity to the asteroid belt. However, there are 2 strong arguments against it. The first is that orbital distances are a fairly narrow range of only about 3 million kilometers. Furthermore, when you exclude the retrograde factor, the orbital inclinations of these moons range only from 30 degrees to 17 degrees, a range consistent with natural moons. It needs to be noted that none of these moons has been seen being captured. This does, however, make the claim that these are captured asteroids nothing but a just-so story. Given Jupiter's proximity to the asteroid belt, it may be a reasonable one, but not really scientific because it is untestable. It is nothing but a rescuing device, however reasonable one it may be. Phoebe is a moon of Saturn, which orbits in the opposite direction to Saturn's rotation. Its non-retrograde inclination to Saturn's equator is just 4.73 degrees. Average orbital radius, 12,952,000 kilometers. Its orbit is, however, quite elongated. The standard explanation is that it is a captured asteroid or Kuiper belt object. However, Saturn is not close to any of these possible sources, making it highly unlikely. Also, the fact that its orbital inclination is so close to Saturn's equator, even if in the opposite direction, goes against Phoebe having been captured. Once again, the claim that it is a captured moon is nothing but an untestable rescuing device for the Nebula Hypothesis. Uranus Retrograde Moons Sycorax has an average orbital radius of 2,179,000 kilometers with an orbital eccentricity of 0.5229, making for a moderately elongated orbit. The key arguments against this being a captured body are the fact that its non-retrograde inclination is only 27 degrees, and Uranus is not near any of the possible sources. Once again, the claim that it is captured is actually nothing but an untestable rescuing device. Neptune has several interesting moons. Its largest moon is Triton, is a particular interest because, contrary to the Nebula Hypothesis, it orbits in the opposite direction to Neptune's rotation. Triton is the only major retrograde moon in the solar system, with a diameter of 2,706 kilometers. This places its size between the Earth's moon and Pluto. Triton is claimed to be a Kuiper Belt object because of its similarities to Pluto, along with its retrograde orbit. However, its average orbital radius is just 354,759 kilometers from Neptune, with an orbital eccentricity of 0.000016, which is very close to circular. In fact, it orbits Neptune slightly closer than the Moon orbits the Earth, and in a more circular orbit. Its non-retrograde inclination is 23.2 degrees, which is approximately the same as that of the Earth's moon. This makes it highly unlikely that it would have been captured, because it would have required exactly the right conditions. Once again, the claim that it is a captured moon is nothing but a rescuing device, because it orbits in the opposite direction from Neptune's rotation. The simple fact of the matter is that it orbits way too close to Neptune and in too circular an orbit for any kind of capture to be reasonable. The only reason for considering it is to save the Nebula Hypothesis from reality. Triton has a very unusual double-sided surface. This suggests a significant amount of geological activity. This, along with its lack of craters, suggests that it is still geologically active, indicating that it is young rather than having time to freeze solid. The lack of any significant cratering further goes against this being a captured body. These retrograde moons do not agree with what is expected from the Nebula Hypothesis of how these bodies formed. The possibility of the 4 retrograde moons of Jupiter being captured from the asteroid belt is reasonable, but still nothing more than speculation. The same thing goes for the idea that the other retrograde moons are captured bodies. In the case of Saturn and Uranus, there are no nearby sources from which these could have come, which makes a capture an unreasonable conclusion. Once again, it is the fact that they orbit in a retrograde direction that produces this speculation. Keep in mind that that is all the idea that these are captured moons is that it is nothing but speculation. With regards to Neptune's moon Triton, its size, closeness to Neptune, circular nature of its orbit goes strongly against it being a captured body. Only its similarity to Pluto suggests the possibility of a capture, even though nothing else does. The idea that some of these moons were captured by their parent bodies is reasonable, but extending that to all of them, the only reason for doing so is trying to save the Nebula Hypothesis from reality. The simple fact is that the solar system does not match the predictions of naturalistic models. They have done a horrible job of predicting what we find in space. However, evolutionists always have some excuse as to why naturalistic models do not fit reality. When possible, they alter the theory to make the failed prediction go away. Creation models, on the other hand, have a rather good track record of predicting what the solar system is really like. When looked at objectively, the best explanation of the solar system is that it was created by God just a few thousand years ago.